And good morning, everyone. And 1 second, you can finally see me. There we go. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. It is FBC Radio Live. It's Thursday, November the 2nd, and we got ourselves a World Series champion there, John. The Texas Rangers having won the World Series for the first time in their franchise's history. So good for them. Good for them. This concludes probably the least watched baseball season in my entire life. Yeah, I mean, quite frankly, I didn't watch much baseball this year, John. I said that before, and I'm not the only one too, because if you look at the ratings for the World Series, it continues to flop, especially when you look back at 2016, and you had over 22 million people tune in to watch the Cubs win their first World Series. I believe it was down to about 8 million now, which, I mean, that's Monday Night Football outdraws that, you know.
The NFL schedule release outdraws that
Yeah.
at times, right? You know, when they do it on a Thursday in May to let you know who's going to be playing in 4 months, gets better ratings than the World Series. And then when you put Texas against Arizona, neither team really has a following. There were no superstars, although Corey Seager's a superstar, but he's not a household name.
Right.
You know, if the Angels had made it with Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout, maybe there's that. Or the big brands like the Dodgers or the Red Sox or the Giants, the Yankees, maybe you'd have more eyes on it.
Even the Dodgers, the last couple of years, the ratings were a little bit better, but they were, I mean, like I said, we're talking less than half what they were, again, just a few years back.
Well, you see those lists, right? Like the 50 biggest athletes in the world. Like,
oh, sure.
There's no baseball players in that list, although Shohei Ohtani, I think, would make it, right? Because he's an international superstar. But for the most part, they're what? Soccer players, basketball players, NFL quarterbacks, you know, race car drivers, whoever. You know, some boxers maybe are in there when Floyd Mayweather was in his prime. But you don't see baseball players. I mean, growing up, that was it. Those were the superstars growing up, with, you know, whoever it might be. Reggie Jackson was arguably like the biggest superstar in American sports in the late 70s, early 80s. That's not the case right now in baseball. And again, the biggest star is Shohei Ohtani. He's a free agent. Where is he going to sign? And also, I know Stephen A. Smith got in trouble for saying this a few years ago. It's difficult to have the best player in baseball, the biggest superstar in baseball, who can't communicate to its biggest audience. That it becomes an issue. I mean, if Patrick Mahomes wasn't able to communicate to the audience in the NFL, he wouldn't be as big a star as he is now.
Oh, sure. I mean, that's true in all life. I mean, you think about how a personal relationship changes how you feel. You know what I mean? Like there's. You see voices, or you hear voices, you see the faces, you see all that, you get some sort of personality from that. And, you know, I get it. I understand. And look, I mean, that could all change depending on where Shohei Ohtani calls home. And we could find that out in just a couple days, to be honest with you. I don't know if it's going to happen that quickly, but, you never know. And to be fair, I mean, you're talking about, you know, a guy who, look, his free agency was going to be complicated to begin with. But now factor in the injury, factor in that he won't necessarily pitch that first year, and it's further complicated. Because if he was going into the offseason fully healthy, having done what he was doing for much of the beginning of the season, it's pretty cut and dry. He's going to get a massive contract because you're basically getting two players for one. Two pretty good to really good players at two pretty key positions. So, you know, again, we'll see what happens where he ends up signing, because that could sway things. Like, look, I one of the things that I like about the Rangers winning, it's kind of funny in the sense that, you know, this team, they lost over 100 games just a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. They go out and they shell out a $250-$60 million to free agents and to improve their team, and they actually win. The Yankees have been trying to do this for decades, John, and they screw it up every single time. It's actually quite comical. So I do tip my cap to the Rangers in that regard, because that to me that's funny. There's some if you're anything but a Yankees fan, I think you can find a little humor in that. So, but no, I mean, look, good for them. Like I said, it's you know, baseball's gotta, you know, they're they're fighting a battle right now. I mean, their popularity is down, viewership is down. There's no real clear. I think the pitch clock helped. Shortening games helped. Um, the average watch time. You're not spending like 5 minutes in between pitches. Watching the pitcher do his thing and all that stuff, and getting bored to death because of it. But it's still a tough. We're living in a fast paced sports world right now, John, and
Hmm.
baseball moves at a snail's pace. I mean, that's the reality of it. I mean, yes, there's action, there's a lot of quick movement and stuff like that, but it's really not the same type of fast paced game like football, like basketball, like even hockey, and like look, hockey is obviously not going to draw as many viewership, but I feel like they maximize their potential viewership better. Does that make sense?
Oh,
Like,
sure, because it's a fast, exciting game, and the young people love it. They love hockey.
let's just put.
I have a grandnephew whose favorite athlete is Connor McDavid. He's a
Mhm.
hockey player. He loves watching hockey. That's his favorite sport. So that's telling you there's going to be growth in that sport. You hope.
Oh yeah, and look, they have their own hurdles to overcome, and they have a lot of the same issues that baseball does. But the big difference is baseball is an American pastime. So baseball has the leg up, or should have the leg up, when it comes to marketing and growing their sport, but they've failed to do so. I think hockey is navigating something different. I think they've had some missteps along the way, whether it's PR decisions, or just not marketing the players the right way. I think they're trying, just like baseball is trying, but like I said before, baseball has that advantage of being America's pastime, and I think they've failed pretty big in that sense, to continue to grow the game, because it is alarming to watch the ratings plummet. Um, especially again when everything is moving away from a game like baseball in terms of how people view sports and how they watch and enjoy what they enjoy too. So, um,
The problem with baseball has always been that the star players can be star players, but they can only have so much of an impact. So,
mhm,
look, I'm Barry Bonds' biggest fan, my favorite athlete of all time. When he was in his prime, I had MLB Network and the MLB package, and I would stay up to watch the
mhm,
Giants play. And like in the first inning, he'd get intentionally walked. In the second inning, they'd pitch around him, and his eye was so good that he would take the walk. And then the third time up, they bring in the lefty specialist. It's like, okay, here's the best player in baseball, and we can't enjoy him. Like this would be like if we were going to watch Tom Brady play, and there was some sort of rule that he can only throw 10 passes in a game, or we're going to go watch LeBron James. He can only handle the ball for 12 times in a game because he has to share the ball equally with his teammates. That would take away a lot of the enjoyment and a lot of that star appeal that Brady and LeBron had. In baseball, you just don't have that. That's why Otani's interesting, because he pitches as well. And even in terms of pitchers, I mean, look, I'm old, I know that, but you remember this when there'd be great pitching matchups, right? We don't have that anymore because half the teams are using what? Openers? The guy pitches a inning
mhm.
in a third, he's pulled. Like I remember, Roger Clemens against Dave Stewart in the postseason. Those were great matchups. You don't see that anymore.
Yeah, and like even like a sport like football, it's like as much as there are bigger or many more um, positional players. I mean, there's still more individualism in that. So, like again, quarterbacks can have an impact on a team like unlike any other position. And there's really nothing like, because like okay, you can look at the pitcher, but even then, like I've always made the argument that yes, the quarterback can impact the defense positively and negatively. So like, can the pitcher do that outside of motivation? No,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't like if you pitched a 1, 2, 3 inning, struck out the side, everything was a strike. It's not like you go into the next inning with a leg up with a man on second. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? And
There's
like,
no flow to baseball.
right,
It's
right.
specific. It's like tennis with sets and games.
Exactly. So like a quarterback, again, if you're a great quarterback, you're a efficient quarterback who doesn't turn the ball over, who again, I mean, how many times did we sit there and watch Tom Brady go and have how many clock killing drives at the end of the game did we? It was like clockwork, pun intended, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. It's like, okay, you need 9 minutes to draw the clock out. Well, guess what? Tom Brady's going to give you 8 minutes and 58 seconds,
Right.
and it's like that impacts the defense. If a quarterback sucks and he turns the ball over, guess what? That impacts the defense because they're constantly on the field and at a disadvantage. You don't get that in baseball. So as much as pitchers have a big impact, it's really only on that one side. And yeah. So to your point, it is tougher in that sense. And it'll be interesting to see how baseball eventually navigates that whole, how they're going to keep pace with everything else. And we'll see.
It's still bringing in a ton of money because it is a regional sport, and attendance was at an all-time high. So it's just done differently than football, which has these huge TV deals, and baseball has good TV deals locally, but not nationally.
Yeah, and look, I mean, and that's going to keep them afloat. And like I said, baseball is, look, part of it too is I mean, there's so many games, John. There's
Right.
so many games. Like it's even for the hardcore baseball fan, it's like, that's a you're committing quite a bit of time to all that, and it's kind of tough. So that again, it's there's got to be some sort of middle ground here. So anyways, before we get to we're gonna close up the show by giving our top 5 teams, make it nice and quick and everything like that. But Celtics are pretty good, huh?
I would say so. Yeah, they almost look like an elite high school team playing like a middle of the road high school team, like it's a blowout, or it almost looks like some WNBA games where the team just gets out to an early lead and just sails from there. No, they're phenomenal, and the important thing here is that they're sharing the basketball. And you look at someone like Drew Holiday, who is a better player than Marcus Smart, but he doesn't need to put his imprint on a game the way Marcus Smart always tried to do. And again, I'm going to prove that I'm old. Drew Holiday reminds me so much of Dennis Johnson when he came here 40 years ago. I know, but work me on this, because Dennis Johnson, when he got here, was a 20 point per game scorer like Drew Holiday is. When Dennis Johnson got here, he said, "Oh, I got Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish, Cedric Maxwell, Danny Ainge, and Gerald Henderson. I don't need to score 20 a game. I can be a facilitator, play defense." That's what Drew Holiday is doing with this team. If he averages 12, 13 a game, so be it. But you've got Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Porzingis, and the rest of the guys that, he's going to be the facilitator, and that's going to lead to championship-style basketball. They look awesome.
Yeah, and look, I mean, the crazy thing is, too, Jason Tatum looks better.
He's pretty good. Yeah.
Well,
good.
And so it was interesting because someone shared, and I know it's early, but someone shared his, how they give those like basically like infrared chart heat maps where where players shoot the most and all that stuff, and they showed his shot chart from last year, and it was a lot of trust me, a lot around the perimeter, and then bits and pieces inside the closer to the basket. And now you look at this year, I don't know, it's only a few games, but it's spread all over the court. And that's something that stood out, is that he's not honing in on, what I mean? He's not, he's expanding his repertoire, so to speak. And, I probably wouldn't have to convince you that maybe it does have to do a little bit with, some of the departures and kind of opening up, different roles or different motivations for some of these players. But yeah, I mean, early returns are, this team is pretty darn good. I don't really care so much about James Harden in LA or Dame in Milwaukee. It's really, in my opinion, about are the Celtics going to beat themselves? No. Okay. Well, then we might finally have that that banner we've been looking for.
The thing about Jason Tatum, I would say, other than Kevin Durant, he has as you use that word appropriately, repertoire, probably the most varied repertoire of any player in the NBA. He can shoot from 3. His mid-range game is impeccable. Driving to the basket, he's 6'9", 230 pounds. He's pretty strong. He's not LeBron or Karl Malone type physique, but he's pretty strong. So he can get the ball to the basket. He can score in a million different ways. Take advantage of that. Don't just be a 3-point shooter. Don't just be a guy who goes to the rim. Use that mid-range game. He's primed for a huge year. He's eligible for the super duper max after this season, which I know the Celtics will give him. And I think now he's got a little room to breathe without Marcus Smart and Grant Williams, who had personalities that could kind of ruin things. And now developing a quiet leadership style. He's not going to be an exuberant leader. He's not going to be Michael Jordan, LeBron, or Kobe Bryant, who
No, that's fine.
He's not that guy. Let him be who he is, but let him play his game.
Well, I'd rather he not get overly emotional, because I think that gets the best of him sometimes. And we've seen that when the Celtics are down and he starts complaining. I mean, that's one of the pet peeves, that I hope that he gets away from, because I think it distracts him. Like, once it gets in his mind that he gets frustrated and maybe he thinks, the officials missed a couple bad calls, I think it impacts him a little bit more. And we see that in his body language on the court. And I think it's gotten better over the years. I mean, part of that's just maturity and growing and, growing up. I mean, the kid's still young. But that's what you want. It's more of a silent accountability. You know what I mean? Whether or not the call was right, don't turn and complain to the officials every time. And, I think, and I think if he were to try to forcefully become more of a vocal, like in your face type of leader, I think, it's a slippery slope, because it's emotions and some people handle it differently. And I think for him, and to your point, he's more of a, the quiet assassin type thing, but he'll lead by example on the court. Like, I mean, that's the thing. His emotion will come through in the plays that he makes and some of the things that happen on the court, not necessarily, the stuff in between when you're running up inside and you're complaining to the officials or saying stuff like that. So, it's exciting to see that evolve, because again, I mean, there's only really one other place that they can go from where they've been, and that's hoisting an NBA championship. So, this isn't about, oh, let's take the next step. No, they've been taking the next steps. They've been stuck on one step for a while now, and it's hopefully this is going to be the season that they get over the hump. So, anyways, all right, it's time to give our top 5 teams, this mess that we try to figure out each and every week, because it really is a mess, to be honest with you. But we're 8 weeks in. Essentially, I missed the 16-game schedule because they're so easy just to be like, hey, we're at the halfway point for most teams. No, we're kind of at the halfway point, halfway-ish. Some teams have 9 games, some have 8. Does anyone have 10 left? I don't know.
No, I think everybody has. Well, no, there's Cincinnati, which appears to be my favorite team now, is 4-3, so they have 10 games left. So there's still, after this week, we'll be 9 weeks into an 18-week schedule. So technically, after this week, we'll be halfway through. But some teams will have 9 games, some teams will have 8.
Right. All right. So, anyways,
I'm here for the math.
Good. Because I'm certainly not. I was starting to convince. I was about to shut down. When a simulation it just has too many things going, it just spazzes out.
Marco Rubio at the Republican
pretty much
back in 2016. I was there. It was just like incredible. And I was working for the Herald at the time, and on the splash, the front page was choked. And then we were doing radio the next day, and he walked by us and just gave us a death stare. I said, I don't think that guy's going to be our next president.
No. You remember the days where you could just put a helmet on wrong and that could torpedo your...
Oh, boy, I do remember that. I
torpedo your political... Hopes.
Yeah.
Yep, it sounds ridiculous now, but I almost kind of wish we still held that type of standard, because things would be maybe a lot less.
We'd have nobody running for president.
We'd have no one.
Vacant seat.
No one in office. No one doing anything. It'd be one hell of a thing. Anyways. But all right, my number 5 team. I'll jump right into it. I got the Kansas City Chiefs. They are trending backwards. I guess you want to consider it. I mean, they are 6-2, so I'm not going to knock them for winning games. But I feel like and maybe you agree with me to this, they've been kind of playing with fire recently. And by that, I mean, there's a lot of things that could have gone slightly different. And you're looking at a team that might be at 500 or below it. We saw a couple weeks ago them go up against Denver. And, this is just weeks removed from Denver giving up 70 points. They failed to put up over 20. They still won. But you asked, well, is this concerning? Well, we'll see. Well, we've seen really one good offensive game out of Kansas City, and it came against the Bears last week, correct? Yeah, so to me, I think 8 weeks in, yeah, you should be concerned about this offense. Fortunately for them, they have a pretty good defense that has carried the load. But if your guy over in Cincinnati, Joe Burrow, is starting to heat up in this Cincinnati team, no, Kyle, it does not count. Yes, if a win against the Packers even counts, just like a win against the Patriots, it just
No.
it doesn't matter. Yeah, if Cincinnati's going to start playing like the team that we expected them to, if you catch Buffalo on the right night, the Ravens are somehow going very under the radar right now. I think all three of those teams could easily beat Kansas City,
Sure.
and
Yep.
so to me, it's concerning. And like I said, this may, depending on how Sunday's matchup goes with Miami, this could be the last time we see them in the top five for a little bit. So for me personally, so number 5 for me, the Kansas City Chiefs.
I have them out of my top 5. They just looked distracted too with the Taylor Swift stuff, and it was comical while they were winning and not being impressive. But they were pretty much taken to the woodshed by the Denver Broncos. And like I said, in 2 games against Denver this year, they scored 28 points. They had 7 field goals and 1 touchdown against a defense that was very leaky for most of the season. So I don't even have them at number 5. I have the Detroit Lions back at number 5. They moved up and down the field on Monday night against the Raiders. They didn't score enough. They kind of died in the red zone. They're going to have to clean that up a little bit. But that's a solid football team with arguably the best offensive line in football. If it's not, it's the Philadelphia Eagles have the best offensive line. And when you have that, you're going to be in games, and that's what the Detroit Lions can do. I know they got blown out by Baltimore, but teams have hiccups. I have Detroit at number 5.
Yeah, actually, Detroit is my number 4 team this week, and again, I mean, each week this list just, there's no continuity to it.
No,
it's just it gets flipped upside down, and I remember at one point last year, I think we had the same like top 3 teams for weeks because it was pretty clear. Now it's a little bit different. I mean, there's still a lot of the same players involved here, but quite frankly, it changes pretty much every week. So, but yeah, for a lot of the things that you said, I have the Lions at number 4. They're not going away. You just kind of hope that they don't have a reverse of what happened last year, where they started out so poorly and then didn't run the table, but almost did. This year they started out pretty good. Let's hope they don't have a second half flop, because, well, it's still the Lions, John, and I'm not ready to put my house on on them winning yet. So, but yeah, for now, number 4 for me, the Detroit Lions.
I think there's 11 teams that could lay claim to being top 5, but so that's going to make that a very fluid list. Number 4 for me is Seattle, and I've been on them all year. They lost week 1.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't look like they were ready. I'll give them a mulligan on that. They did beat Detroit. They beat a good Cleveland team last week in a struggle, but they won. So I have Seattle at number 4.
Yeah, I thought about it, and you're true. You're right. I mean, I was down on Seattle coming into the season. You were on top of it the entire time. So I almost put them at number 5. Maybe next week. We'll see. I mean, it really depends. I mean, if Kansas City goes out and loses pretty big to Miami, yeah, I'd say it's time to sound the alarms a little bit. But speaking of Miami, they are my number 3 team. Again, am I going to be moved much by a victory over the Patriots? No, but it's just kind of like the Patriots when they used to play bad teams. They beat them, and they beat them pretty well, and that's what happened this week. 31-17. I mean, that chalk it up. That's it. Move on. Next week we got another win. That's pretty much what Miami is right now. They have a incredibly potent offense. Perhaps with the MVP and Tyreek Hill, or you can talk about A.J. Brown being an MVP in Philadelphia. Either way, Miami's a really good team, and if Kansas City doesn't necessarily compete, there might be some issues. But number 3 for me, the Miami Dolphins.
Number 3 for me is the Cincinnati Bengals. I know they're 4-3, but they've won 3 in a row, and that was darn impressive what they did in San Francisco last week. They dominated. And right now, Joe Burrow, to me, is on track to win the MVP. He got off to a horrible start. I get that. But if you're going to have a few horrible games, do it earlier rather than later. He is absolutely cooking right now. I call
Aaron
him Baby
Rodgers.
Brady. Yeah, no, it's the best thing to do, right? It's like the Oscars, let the good pictures come out.
Extended preseason.
Yeah, pretty much.
I haven't thought about the 2021 MVP race since last
week. I thought
week.
I'd get through without you having that.
Hey, you opened the door. You opened the door for this one.
But that's your younger brother, Joe Burrow, so I know you support him. 28 of 32. He look, he's not Tom Brady. I'm not going there. He stylistically is the closest to Brady of any quarterback in football. Just the kind of the way he conducts himself and the way he plays the position, I believe. So he's playing at a very high level. That defense creates a lot of turnovers. Their weapons are supreme. I have them at number 3. Look out.
All right, number 2 for me, Baltimore Ravens. I said it earlier. I thought they very quietly have been just going about business. Lamar Jackson's been having a really good season and really doing a lot of heavy lifting. That's why I was surprised last week, especially that his name wasn't mentioned more among the MVP favorites. I think he's going to get a little bit more love moving forward, especially again since the usual suspects just aren't having MVP worthy type seasons. Like I said last week, I almost felt like they had put Mahomes at number 1 by default, and it kind of was backed up by his performance this week. Like, okay, yeah, you had one standout performance, and that's the tricky thing about stats nowadays, John, because you can accumulate stats and not necessarily play great because it's an open football game. I mean, it's how the league is played now. It's very open, very that's why the league average passer rating is up 25 points from what it was 20 years ago. I mean, it's just the fact of the matter. It doesn't take away anything from what people do, but average quarterback, and I'm not calling them an average quarterback, so settle down, people, but average quarterbacks can put up big numbers. It is what it is. It doesn't mean they're great, they're elite, or generationally great. It doesn't it just means that they play in this current NFL. So, but anyways, back to the Ravens. They've played really good football. Lamar Jackson's doing it and been doing it consistently. So I do hope that he gets a little bit more love in this MVP race. But the Ravens are playing really good football right now, and watch out for them. So number 2 for me, Baltimore.
I'm with you right there at number 2. Echo everything you said. That's a real solid football team. And if Lamar continues to play at this, he will be in the MVP race. I've got Baltimore also at number 2.
Which means we likely share the same number 1 team, and no, it's not the New England Patriots. it's
the Las Vegas Raiders.
Yeah, it's oh man. I can live off the success of the Patriots for quite some time, so I'm not too concerned with that. I'm okay with that. But one of the teams that did beat them in Super Bowl, the Philadelphia Eagles, are my number 1 team, because right now, obviously, they have the best record. They only have 1 loss, and I've been saying all year that they're not at their height, their peak, but they're still winning football games, and in a way, not overly impressive, but not like we look at Kansas City and we say, wow, they've kind of escaped a few games by the skin of their teeth to win. You know what I mean? Like maybe if Trevor Lawrence could just throw, a half inch inside the end zone a little bit more, then maybe we're talking about the Jaguars being 7-1 right now and the Chiefs having 3 losses. So to me, I look at them as being a little bit different, whereas Philadelphia, I think, is enduring a lot of adversity. And by adversity, I mean like that post-Super Bowl loss adversity, something that most teams don't handle well. I think they're handling it well considering. And I think as the season progresses, we're going to see them become more and more like the well-oiled machine that I think a lot of us expected to see. And right now, when you want to talk about a team that has the defense, has the offense, has the quarterback, it's Philadelphia, because, I mean, you might think it's San Francisco, but based on the last couple of weeks of Brock Purdy's performance, you might start to doubt that a little bit. And maybe that, he's going to come back to earth a little bit. We've seen Jalen Hurts have a great season last year. I mean, again, he was in the MVP race up until his injury. Hell, he was probably the favorite, or at least he was the favorite in my eyes. So we know he's capable of doing this, and it looks like he's replicating that again this year. And he's been getting better the last few weeks. He had a couple rocky performances early on, but the last couple weeks he's looked really good. And again, the Eagles are a team that just looks like they might be starting to separate themselves a little bit from some of their peers.
Yeah, number 1, they're the only team with 1 loss. They're well-balanced offense, defense, and like you said, Jalen Hurts kind of cleaning up those turnovers. And if he plays at that level, they're going to be very, very difficult to beat because, again, offensive and defensive lines are so strong. When you have those 2 powerful units, you're going to be in every game. Like, no one's blowing the Philadelphia Eagles out. They're going to be in every game. and they still had perhaps the most impressive win of the year, although maybe Buffalo did, both of those teams manhandling the Miami Dolphins, who I think is still somewhat fraudulent, but we'll know more after Sunday when they play the Kansas City Chiefs over in Germany. That's going to be an interesting game. But yep, I've got Philadelphia #1 as well.
Well, I'd almost agree with that a little bit, but like if that's the case, then there's a lot of fraudulent teams out here, even teams that we think that are elite. Because again, it's just we've been saying it for weeks. There doesn't seem to be that team that's really, really. I mean, like I said, I mean the Eagles are probably the closest you're going to get. The 49ers felt like that for a few weeks, but the last couple of weeks have certainly tempered those thoughts a little bit. So, this is a good thing because it means the end of the season is going to be quite unpredictable. We hope. So we'll see. But anyways, that's going to do it for us here today. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll kind of preview the rest of or all of Sunday's action, and of course we get that nice Miami Kansas City game bright and early from Deutschland.
Yep.
Friend. Yes, it's going to be good. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll talk to you then.